Too performative. All right, everyone's coming into the live interview here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ben's Book Club. We'll just let everybody sort of wander in. You sort of have to picture like we're all coming into one room, and there's Michael and myself, and we're sort of sitting awkwardly at a table, and all of you are wandering in, and you've got your cups of tea or whatever, and you just sort of wander in, and we all sit around a big table. Currently, we're sitting around the table. Um, yeah, welcome to Ben's Book Club. For those of you who are first time dialers, inners, what we normally like to start with is yes, Chris is on it. In the chat, we just love to hear where you're chiming in from. I think one of the best things about this book club is how we have such a diverse selection of people from all across the world sometimes. Yeah, Ian. See, I told you Ian would be here. Michael,
look
at
that.
It.
You said it.
Second in the chat. From the UK. Hi, Ian. Just very appreciative of you. Nick from Hobart. From the USA. Oh, that's exciting. Good old USA. Townsville. Noosa, Bathurst.
Oh, Bathurst. Fantastic.
Yes, Bathurst. Bathurst is great. Sunny Perth. I can't see. I'm not from Perth, so I don't know whether that's sarcasm. Is it sunny there at the moment? Where are you tuning in from, Michael? Can I ask that?
I am tonight. I'm normally in Sydney. Tonight I am on the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria.
Nice.
Very nice part of the world. Just down here for a couple of days.
Is it nice and cool there?
It is a little bit fresh, but it seems like it's pretty fresh everywhere at the moment. So it's just.
Well, I'm in Queensland. I'm wearing a cardigan, so
That's you busted out the winter woolies. That's quite
as
extreme.
bad as
a cardigan is fairly. It's fairly extreme for Queensland.
I know.
I'm originally from kind of northern New South Wales, so I kind of get that if it kind of got to the point where you needed to put a jumper on, you knew you were in a cold snap.
Yeah, it's definitely getting a bit cool here. Wollongong as well. It's awesome to see everybody. Thank you for tuning into Ben's Book Club. Really appreciate everyone. I will read a very quick bio for Michael, and then we'll get into chatting about this awesome book. Which have had such a good response in the Facebook group. Everyone seems to absolutely love this book, and I did too. I really loved it. So I'm really excited to talk to Michael today. So Michael, this wonderful, handsome fellow we see before us, has been a journalist, a producer, and a media executive for the last 15 years, which is massive. And you now co-own a podcast production company called Fear and Greed, which is home of Australia's most popular business podcast. So you've got this whole other life going over this way.
That's right.
And now you've sort of moved over into writing, and this is your very first novel. So let's put our hands together for Michael. Woo!
I'm just going to picture.
Yeah, you can just picture everybody. There's 75 people here who's clapping right now.
That's quite deafening.
Can we start with just your journey? I'd love to hear about how you've had this career, and then has writing always been a thing that you've wanted and you've been toying with in the background, or was it a sudden spark, or just really interested in your journey to writing this book?
Yeah, thanks. Look, a bit of both, really, kind of in terms of I've always been interested in writing. I always wanted to be a journalist. And so I thought that was kind of where I was going to go and basically continue on that path forever. And so I studied journalism at uni in Bathurst, which is why I was very excited to see Bathurst come up there.
That's cool.
And then I went into radio and worked as a radio producer for quite some time, and kind of worked my way up and along through there. And then end of 2019, I had a very kind of sudden career change, and I was kind of in between jobs and deciding what to do next. And I thought I'll take a couple of months, because it was right at the end of 2019, and I thought when we get to say kind of end of January 2020, I'll start kind of looking for jobs. Not the best time to start looking for a job, because about that time, pretty much every available job in the country just disappeared overnight. but during that time, I'd also kind of said, I said to my wife that, look, I think I want to have a go at writing something because I've always wanted to write creatively. Everything I've ever written has been factual. It's always been kind of about, state politics or federal politics or a crime report, a police report, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
you're trying to cram as much information as you possibly can into as fewer words as you can. So you're trying to
Yeah.
convey kind of the whole kind of who, what, when, where, why of a stabbing or something in 200 words, and you're doing it for the spoken word to
Yeah.
be broadcast on radio. Very different thing to writing writing a novel. And I thought that I always wanted to do it, and I thought I've an idea kind of came to me. I thought I'm going to have a go. I just really want to have a crack at this, and I'll know very quickly whether or not it's something that I can do or not. Because to try and change and to try and kind of start stretching that out and building something out of nothing instead of just relaying actual facts that have happened in the world. And so I got to kind of 1,000 words. And I'm like, okay, all right, this is going okay. And then you get to 10,000. Then I kind of was nudging 100,000. I'm like, okay, all right, this is okay. This is working. And I got to the end, and I'm like, hang on, this is a real book. I said the characters that I started with are the characters that I finished with, and they actually had kind of a plot along the way.
What the
And
heck? This is the opposite of what I normally hear, which is writing is difficult and I had to push this out and I had to get to the typewriter and bleed, how Hemingway says. But it feels like you just sort of said you just sort of tripped and fell into having a book you've written.
Well, look, it took probably the best part of 6 months kind of on and off, because at the same time we were setting up Fear and Greed, the podcast business. So I was a bit kind of distracted and but I was trying to write every morning and trying to kind of get like 1,000 words or 2,000 words down.
Yeah.
But I was just at that point, you're writing for yourself. And so I was just kind of thinking, I was enjoying the challenge of it. I was enjoying the challenge of working with a plot that was a little bit kind of tricky in terms of making sure that all the bits and pieces aligned and that the logic was kind of sound. And so I was
Yeah,
enjoying
right.
kind of the thinking about that. And
Like a puzzle that you had to
yeah,
solve.
absolutely. And it was
Mm.
just so different from anything else that I had done. And I'm like, this is great. I'm really, really enjoying this. And then the fact that it kind of got to the end, and I'm like, okay, I think this works. So now I'm going to try and find a publisher. And
That's
that,
amazing.
I got to say, the finding an agent is probably up there as one of the hardest things to do. And that was the really, really kind of challenging part then. And kind of getting into that, I just
What
got,
did you? Yeah, that's what I'm actually gonna. Yeah, what did you do? Like, did you just go to Google and say, "What do I do? I wrote a book," or what? How did you find your agent and all that sort of stuff?
yeah,
I mean, some people wouldn't even know to find an agent. You just
yeah.
send it to a publisher.
Well, I knew that there were kind of a couple of kind of pathways to being published. And I know I said that I was kind of writing it for myself, but I think you're always kind of writing it with an end goal in mind, which is to be published if you can. And
Yeah.
well, it certainly was for me. I was certainly hoping that would be the outcome. And I just, yeah, I think I did actually just Google it, just going kind of, what are the steps? How does this actually play out? And
Makes sense.
and I mean, you hear all the stories, and so you do kind of. What I kind of gathered fairly quickly was that if you wanted to be published in Australia, there are kind of, it's almost more. There are many ways to do it in that you can actually approach publishers directly in some cases in Australia. Whereas if you want to be published in the US, then you're going to need an agent to be
Yeah.
representing you. And that was kind of pretty clear from everything that I read online when I was doing.
I mean, how else do you do it? I mean, I remember I did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
How else are you supposed to figure all this stuff out? It's just such a.
Yeah. And fortunately, there's tremendous resources online. There's a lot of information online and a lot of people kind of sharing their experiences. And so I just kind of jumped into it and started kind of querying agents and looking for, and it was, but I mean, that's a tough process that you get,
Yeah.
you cop so many rejections and
You
I
do.
kept a spreadsheet because I wanted to kind of keep it well ordered and everything,
Yeah,
but it's the most depressing spreadsheet just to see kind of, there's even like
it
the
is.
column of success or not success, and it's just
Yeah,
no, 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 no.
yeah.
And then finally, kind of there were 42 no's along the way, and then finally you only need one yes.
You
Um,
do, and that's the thing. Like, you just need one champion who loves
yep.
what you've done. And I mean, you wrote a great book too. So it's, I mean, everyone in the chat can probably
Thank you.
understand just how difficult. Like, this is a great book, but even then, it's very difficult to find a champion in an agent, even when you've got something as winning as this book. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you. And it can be, and this is what I kind of see when you hear about people getting rejected, and the importance of just kind of keeping on going, because you don't know what's going on in the kind of the professional life of the person that is saying no, that it might just not be the right book for them on that day at that
yeah,
particular time, and that I mean, you just kind of keep on going, and it can get tough after a while. But if you kind of really want to kind of get there, you just keep on chipping away at it.
got to
And
be
you really only
persistent.
do need, as you say, one champion.
Yeah, 100%. For people who are new here to Ben's Book Club too, I haven't mentioned this from the top, but the main point of today is it's for me to learn how Michael writes, because then I can steal and do it for myself as well with my own writing. But in addition to that, I really want to give us all an opportunity to get to know Michael. So if you do have questions, or you have any comments, or something that you want to say to Michael about the book, um, yeah, just pop them in the chat, and I'll read them to Michael as we go. But we really want this to be interactive for all of you, and not just me hogging Michael, although I will. Um, so I'm really interested in this idea of your path from journalism to
Mhm.
creative writing. Um, you said that they're very different, but what if there are any similarities? What would be the similarities between the two?
Well, it's still playing with language, and it is still, there is still that there's a consistent love of words
Yeah.
between the two, and you are still kind of, both require a lot of reading, and you wouldn't want to do either of them, journalism or kind of writing creatively, if you didn't enjoy reading.
Mm.
And so I think that the big difference is really that kind of idea of, um, you're not trying to give as much information as you can quickly, and just to try to build out the plot. And I really did think that was the part that would be the hardest, the most difficult, is really kind of not giving everything away on the first page, because it's what
Yeah.
I've kind of been trained to do. You lead with the headline, and just, which would be a terrible way to write the book. Just start with the end, and then just just kind of, because basically a newspaper article, you can kind of read the first 3 or 4 paragraphs and get the main guts of the story. If you did that with this book, or with any book, you're really kind of not going to go anywhere. So
Yeah.
that's probably the main kind of difference, that it is really that the way you are using the language and the way you're conveying the idea. But it's also about then kind of building characters.
Mm.
And this is also, I think, a way that something that I really enjoyed, because creating something out of nothing, and creating characters out of nowhere, rather than having to be very, very factual, very, very accurate in the way you're representing things. Otherwise you'll get sued for defamation if you do it inaccurately
Yep.
when you're writing in journalism. And so that was probably another thing. And look, I found it a fairly big kind of jump across, but in the end, I do prefer this. I certainly kind of would love
Okay.
um to be kind of writing forever, writing creatively
Well,
forever.
that's awesome. Well, I think you're
And
definitely on that path. We've got some questions here. I'd love to just get to a couple of them.
mhm.
Gordana and Jen both said really loved the book, which is awesome. Mandy had a very specific question, which is, are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you know what those two terms? I'm assuming you do. Yes, awesome.
Yep,
Which one would you fall into the category of?
absolutely a pantser. I sit down and I just um, start writing, and just kind of see where it ends up. And really, I didn't have kind of a firm ending for this one until I was probably 2/3 of the way through.
Wow.
Um, and I don't understand how people can plot it out in in such detail. Like,
Yep.
just because I don't know, it feels like that's almost too much information to know in advance.
Well,
And
it's like what you were just talking about. Like, if I knew what was coming up, because I'm very similar. Like, I do a lot of writing off the cuff and
yeah,
inspired writing, I guess you'd call it. But it's if I knew what was coming, I'd feel like I would need to tell people straight away,
yeah,
just get it all out. I'm not
yeah.
very good at just holding back. Um,
Yeah, just feel this compulsion to
yeah,
share as quickly as you possibly can.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
100%. Yeah.
and so no, look, I would definitely a pantser in that it's just see where it goes. And if it doesn't work, you can always edit it out later and just
Mm,
kind of get it down. And the inspiration kind of on different parts kind of comes as you go along. And so I did find that as I was writing, there were a few points where I was stuck, where I was just like, okay, I don't actually know what happens. And so for me in that case, it's kind of two ways where it kind of was resolved. I most of my ideas come in the shower, and
great
so I
place.
yeah, very, very, very long showers, regularly kind of run out of hot water in terms of trying to come up with ideas. And then all of a sudden, when you've got the idea, there's this mad rush to get out of the shower and go and write it down because before you forget it, because you do forget so quickly, don't you?
Yes,
Like you come up
I
with this and you're
do.
like, I'm never going to forget this. And 3 minutes later, it's gone.
No, but what you're left with though is I had a brilliant idea,
Which is even
right?
worse.
You remember the brilliant, I had something great, but
Yep.
then you've,
Yep. Yep.
ah,
You
it's
remember
so,
the fact that you had an idea, you just don't remember what the idea was, which is actually infinitely worse.
that's,
Um,
that's it. Really
and
down to it. Yes, absolutely.
and the other one was we used to because this was kind of during COVID and lockdowns, we used to kind of take the kids for bike rides all the time. And so I don't know, it was just kind of being outdoors and riding along that all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, this is going to happen now. And then
Mm.
kind of just kind of inspiration comes when your mind is suddenly off the task at hand, it seems.
That's
So
really it. Yeah, a lot of people say that writing is not just at the keyboard, but a lot of it's going on in your subconscious as you're thinking about other things,
yeah,
and all of it will strike you, and it's like your mind's been doing smart work that your conscious mind wouldn't be capable of sometimes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that suddenly it's almost like you're trying too hard to force it and you just kind of let it go. And all of a sudden that blockage, whatever it is,
Yeah,
kind of shifts away.
and then you were forcing it. Have you and you write and you're like, oh, this is just falling dead. Like I'm just forcing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, feel like we've got kindred spirits
I
here. I
feel
feel
like this is pretty much we're the same person.
we are, yeah, yep, in essence. Um, got a lot of comments here, man. Like I'm just gonna
Yeah.
go
I love them.
through a lot of this stuff. Now, there's a couple of questions here. There is anonymous attendee from the Q&A has written, "What was the inspiration for How to Be Remembered?" And I think Ian had a similar question, which, what was the thing? What was the jumping off point for this very specific idea
Yeah.
that the whole book really did revolve around?
The idea came to me in the shower, and
Brilliant.
it was about kind of strangely enough, it was about social media, and it was about kind of the idea that people probably regret a fair bit of stuff that they post online, whether it's kind of photos on Instagram or tweets that they have later kind of deleted. But unfortunately, in many cases, it still exists somewhere. That's your digital footprint, and really it's probably there forever, especially
Yep.
if you regret it, it is going to stick around. And so I was thinking about how kind of some people would probably love to be forgotten in that respect. And then I don't know how, but I just started thinking about the other part, which was, or the other side to it, which would be, well, what if somebody just wanted to be remembered? And there was something unknown, something big though, that was preventing that from happening. And I thought, okay, this is good. So I thought this has got enough to sustain it and kind of play it out. And then I thought, okay, how would you do that? And to me, the logical kind of way to do that was chronological, kind of
Yep.
following his life
Well,
along.
and a few people have mentioned it actually. Let me see if I can find. May said the opening hooked me, and I had a question about your opening because I thought one of the best openings to a novel, honestly, I've read for a very long time. Just you're straight in, and I was so interested when the couple woke up and, mum and dad woke up and couldn't remember Tommy and couldn't remember their own baby. And I was instantly like, whoa. And the rest of the book, I was just hooked in. But is that just was born out of this idea that you were just going to tell it chronologically and then you came to that opening?
Yes. Yeah. And this is going to sound really bad and really incriminating. I did it chronologically because I didn't know any other way to do it. I couldn't actually think of anything else. Like to me, kind of books where it gets very kind of complicated and there's like multiple kind of timelines running and things. I think at that point I was just like, you know what? I think it's a big enough challenge for me to try and sit down and write this.
Mm.
I'm just going to do it in the way that feels right to me, where I'm actually going to be able to follow this along logically. And if I want to play around with the structure of it, I can do it later. But for me, it was just kind of, you know what? Let's start with when he's a baby, because to me, there was going to be a lot of questions that kind of come up right at the start. If I was to start when he was kind of 20 or so, you'd have so many questions about kind of how would this have actually played out as a child,
Yes.
or on his first birthday in particular. And
Yes.
then I think I thought, well, actually, that's fantastically heartbreaking, which actually makes me sound really kind of cruel and
No,
callous.
no, that you sound like an author when you say that.
Yeah, and it's just like this is terrific, because it's quite confronting in a way.
Yeah.
And I remember when I gave it to my wife to read, because she was one of the first kind of two readers of the book, and it was very, very dark. At that point, it was still quite a grim book. And I remember she was reading those first couple of chapters, and I walked in on her reading it, and there were just kind of tears streaming down her face.
Ah,
And she goes, "How could you write this? You're a monster." And you know what? There's something wrong with me because I'm grinning as I say it. But you know
yeah.
what? I'm like, this is fantastic. I've had an effect.
You've
There is
got
a
something. Yeah,
reaction.
that's what you want. Like
Yeah.
you made a person feel something. That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
what we all
and
want.
I think just kind of starting with that and really kind of just jumping straight into that first kind of the first year and that first night, it again just felt like the logical kind of thing to do,
Mm.
because it is kind of heartbreaking, and it's pretty awful. And
It
for
is.
anyone who
And
hasn't kind of read it, I mean, it does get happier. There is a lot more kind of hope, and that's actually probably one of my fears for the book, is that people will kind of start reading it and kind of get to the first chapter or first couple of chapters and go, "This is grim. This is just."
yeah.
And this is too depressing.
Yep.
But really, it is about that hope, and it's about that resilience, and that kind of the power of just kind of pushing on, and the optimism. Because you've got to say, I mean, Tommy would have to be the most optimistic person
Yes.
in the world,
I
in
would
order
say
to,
that.
yeah, to kind of get through what he does.
Um, the intro though, like even though it was very dark, it still had this sort of playfulness to it where it felt very authentic, it felt very real, but I almost I didn't foresee that there was going to be some sort of grim, horrible downward spiral for Tommy. Like I did feel when you were describing, the fastidiousness of the father and things like that with the bus schedule and things like that, I just, oh, okay, it's a little playful here. Like I'm in safe hands, in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
words.
Hopefully so. And I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think anyone kind of thinks that they're setting out to read a book that is kind of just an exercise in depression kind of thing. It's just that really we're just setting it up at the start in order
yeah,
to give him what he needs to overcome.
absolutely.
That is the purpose.
I'd love to talk about what you just talked about then, which was, or mentioned, which was Tommy's optimism. Now, Cheryl has a question here.
Mhm.
Cheryl has said, Michael enjoyed the book immensely, which is a theme. Oh, and Cheryl's actually talking in chat too. But did you write it as a story that just evolved, or is there some purpose message underlying that you've aimed for? And in just talking with you then, I mean, is hope and optimism something that you really want to spread? Like it's a really powerful thing to have embedded in your work.
The thing for me, that, and thank you, Cheryl, for that. That's lovely. I think for me, the one of those one of the themes and one of the kind of key points that I was trying to kind of make was that the legacy that we leave and the way that we can be remembered doesn't necessarily have to be the big things, obviously, but really that it can be in those little encounters that we have with people, and that every single thing that you say to someone or do can have an impact. And for you, it might be fleeting. It might be very brief. It could just be a couple of words, but it can last with someone. It can stick with them for a lifetime. And so why wouldn't you try and make that a positive kind of encounter? Why wouldn't you try and leave someone with a better impression of you than they kind of came in with?
Mm,
And so it was really kind of about that idea of this legacy, and about how that can be built up in ways beyond kind of the physical, and really that just I, I don't think we're nice enough to each other at times, and that
yeah.
people seem quite content for their legacy to be kind of quite unpleasant at times. And you see that online. That like, this is, your words and your actions have impact,
Yeah.
and they have power, and that you should do what you can to make those kind of a positive one, because that will be how people remember you, and through your family and through your friends. But really it is kind of through those little things. So that was really kind of a key kind of theme, and the optimism was really kind of a part of that, I think.
Yeah. Was it hard to, because I imagine when you're writing, especially a person who is so in the moment with their writing, like the way you describe how you write, was it hard to maintain a sense of hope with Tommy? Like, he sort of in his teenage years at school, there was a very brief moment where he had one of his reset years where he sort of
Mm.
just was like, "Well, what's the point?"
Yeah.
But
Well,
it was
yeah.
just so impressive how he picked himself up, and then was that hard for you as well? Like, he's so admirable, and he's just he's so winning. Like, I want to be like him when I'm reading about him.
Yeah, well, for me, it was a case of, um, in order for it to be, I mean, you already have to kind of suspend your disbelief with the book, in terms of, I mean, this idea that someone could be forgotten every year on their birthday is pretty kind of extraordinary. So you already need to kind of suspend that disbelief in order to kind of get into the book. But once you do that, hopefully it kind of feels real. And to me, part of that realness, let's stick with that,
That's
is
fine.
yeah, no one's going to fact check me, I hope. Is that there would be no one can be 100% kind of eternally optimistic. There are going to be these periods, especially when you are being kind of hit with it. People can be naturally optimistic, but there will be times when they kind of do take a bit of a dive.
Yeah.
And for me, it was important for him to experience that. And probably at the time when I mean, if it was going to happen, it'll happen in adolescence, because that is kind of when all those questions of kind of why me,
Yes.
would be asked anyway. And so, yeah, I feel like that it kind of added a little bit of depth to him. And for me, the period that he had kind of in hospital, it really wasn't so much about the kind of, the fact that Josh, who he met in hospital, kind of might not have been going to survive kind of what he was going through. It was more the idea that it gave him more renewed purpose, because of that kind of come and find me element,
Mm,
that told him that there was more to his life and to the world than
yeah.
the very kind of confined, very restricted, very sheltered in a way, life that he had led up until that point.
Um, just very quickly, that conversation with Josh, obviously, there's so much of the book that sort of are you all right? You've
Yeah, I
lost
just there's in this hotel room. I think I was too stationary for too long, and the light switched off.
wave
So
your arms around,
I
yeah.
just, if you see me do this every now and then, it's partly because I'm enthusiastic, but also because I don't want to sit in the dark.
um, I'm just curious at how you write, because you needed him to meet Josh, and then you
Mhm.
needed that conversation to take place. And so I guess my question is, do you backtrack, or did he suddenly just have a room with someone in the hospital and then Josh started to form out of that? Or did you go, I need him to have a conversation with this person to then lead up into this? Just wondering how you came up with that specific thing.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I've got to kind of cast my mind back actually a bit now. I think it was a case of I knew I wanted him to meet somebody because I needed him to have another companion.
Yeah.
And I mean, at its heart, I suppose you'd say it's kind of it's a love story. But it's also not just kind of the love between him and Carrie, but it's also kind of the friendship, which is
Yeah.
really, really important between Tommy and Josh. And this idea that people can be friends, or that are just kind of naturally drawn together as friends, even
There's
kind of,
something
and you
deep within them that makes them still gel
yeah,
really.
and I think you see that in kind of school friends, for instance, that have been apart for like 2 or 3 decades or something, and they haven't spoken to each other for years and years, and then you kind of get back in a room with them, and within a minute, it feels like no time has passed. And kind
Yeah.
of, I think that's that same idea of kind of people can just be drawn together like that. But in terms of to answer your actual question instead of the question that I kind of asked myself halfway through, was I think it was this idea that he did need a companion. And so the logical kind of thing would have been who will kind of draw him out of where he's living and kind of out of the funk that he's in. And it would be someone else that
Yes.
was preferably kind of his own age, that could almost be a companion throughout kind of his life.
Yeah,
And so
right.
it was quite deliberate, kind of bringing him in there. I think. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's
was.
hard to say in backstory. Yeah.
It feels very deliberate now. I don't know how deliberate it was at the time. It feels like a lot of it, kind of in kind of retrospect, you're like, oh yes, I definitely meant to do that. And at the time,
Definitely.
if I could actually go back and revisit myself, I probably had no idea what I was doing.
Nick has actually mentioned exactly what we were just talking about while we were talking about it. So Nick has said, I especially love the book. I especially love the idea that some friendships, like between Tommy and Josh, are sort of destined to be despite the forgotten memories. And that's really lovely. It is a very core, um, again, that hopeful kind of optimistic, beautiful thing where we
Yeah,
can all, we hope that's the way the world is, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think I think everyone probably does have a relationship that they would think that they would kind of say is similar to that.
Mm,
So I think that um, I feel like a lot of the themes in this are kind of universal, um, in that they're not just. This is an Australian book, and I saw a question there about kind of where it was,
where, yep, yep, yep.
where the book was set, and I would love to kind of talk about that one.
Yeah,
Um,
let's go.
because was it Marion? Marion. And sorry, I feel like I'm kind of barging in, but I
No,
saw
go.
it and I'm like, I'm fascinated by
100%.
this question, because Marion said, you might laugh, but up until Tommy's trip to the pool just before his birthday, I thought the book was set in England because the town names Upper Reach and Mortlake. And now Marion is curious which state the book is set in. It's not set in any particular state. The idea was that I felt the themes were universal, and therefore the setting should be fairly universal as well.
Mm,
And part of that is deliberate, actually in quite a commercial way as well. I wanted to I was hoping to be able to see this book published overseas as well. And I felt like that the themes were so, I think everyone in every part of the world kind of would have this kind of innate desire to be remembered or to leave something kind of through their family, through the legacy that they do leave. Um, and so to me, that the setting became kind of less important as having its own identity, and therefore
mm.
could be a little bit more kind of non-specific. It is Australian, because obviously there's a hot Christmas, but I never kind of set out exactly where it is. I suppose in my head when I was writing it, I was probably thinking of kind of around Bathurst and around kind of
Ah,
that
there we
area,
go.
because or I also kind of grew up in Henty, kind of, which is near between Wagga and Albury, and we had, and the Henty pool was very, very similar to the pool that's described in there, just this little kind of snapshot of Henty described in the book. And so, I mean, fortunately, The translation rights have now kind of been selling. It's kind of being going to be translated into German and Italian and kind of Czech and Polish and Portuguese and things. And so I think this idea that these themes are universal is kind of now playing out.
That's awesome.
Because I think everyone does want to be remembered.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations, man, because
Thank
that's
you.
not every debut has that happen. So I think it speaks to just how great this book is.
Thank you.
Um, oh man, there's so many comments. I'm really, you guys are awesome. Like I
This is
didn't need to prep.
fantastic.
I know I didn't need to prep at all, really, did I? I thought this question from Linda, which was really interesting. Hi, Michael, great book. Thank you. Did you ever want to make Richie do something sinister to Tom when he was an adult? And yeah, that's interesting because Richie was kind of this nefarious sort of, but he was never
Mm-hmm.
really particularly, yeah, I guess, yeah, talk about the
Yeah.
creation of Richie and his role.
Yeah, Richie is an interesting one because he could so easily have been that character at the end. That again, I'm assuming that everyone has read it, but if they haven't, I won't kind of give too much away. But
Okay.
that Tommy would be, sorry, that Richie would be that character that there is that bit of a run in with him. But I thought that Richie was actually he was kind of a victim in all of it. That he was
Mm.
actually kind of um, he was kind of being moved around in a way by the universe, essentially, kind of filling in for slipping into those gaps that Tommy left behind. And so he didn't have any say over his own life and what he was doing. And I just thought it was almost too much, and it was too much for Richie when he didn't really deserve. And sure, it's pretty nasty, but he probably wouldn't have deserved what happened
Mm.
there if I'd gone that way. And so I thought, it's probably better to happen to someone who is kind of truly loathsome, and who you probably don't actually mind that happening to. And, and so that was that. It was really quite. It could have gone either way. And I think either way would have probably been okay, but I just didn't want this idea of actually just picking too much on Richie.
On Richie, yeah.
Yeah, which is
So you're
it's
very,
weird when you start to feel sympathy for characters that aren't that aren't real, and that kind of you have control over kind of how it plays out. And I was like, oh, I
yeah.
feel too sorry for this guy. And I think at that point you're like, okay, this is starting to feel real.
Yeah, and that's a good gauge for your readers though too, because people reading will have the similar feelings that you feel. And then, I mean, we probably wouldn't have liked seeing Richie necessarily go through what you were alluding to, which I also won't mention. Although we'll probably get into spoilers soon because there's a few
Okay.
people clamoring to ask about the finish,
Okay.
especially. I do want to get there, but we'll just have a couple more questions.
Mhm.
There's actually Jody and Cheryl both said this, and this is interesting, Michael. I almost didn't finish the book from the first couple of chapters, and Jody's saying this, my little boy is a Tommy, and that would have been hard. But very glad I pushed through, and Cheryl's the same. Cheryl said, I found the beginning challenging, and was tempted to walk away, but that's not how I read books. Yes, Cheryl, well done.
I'm very
Um,
glad, Cheryl.
yes.
That's not how you read books. But on that, I think I wanted to. There was the risk that Tommy's whole childhood was going to be too depressing as well, which is why
Mm,
then the dairy and if I can just kind of mention the dairy and the idea of kind of where
yeah,
his
100%.
childhood was kind of set was because I had to go with essentially a foster home, a group home, because it's the only place where you could feasibly have kids coming and going, and in the right circumstances, they may not necessarily be expected to arrive, and they may not be expected to leave, but they do. And so I thought that was kind of at it by necessity. But I was very, 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 very keen to avoid the kind of stereotype of the kind of almost a kind of a Dickensian kind of orphanage,
Mm,
and instead that's why the character of Miss Michelle, was so important to the book,
yeah.
because I wanted you to see basically from chapter 2, chapter 2, I think, that there is this person who is essentially kind of kindness personified, who is a champion for Tommy. even though she doesn't remember him, that she is someone who just kind of keeps on kind of supporting him and loving him, even though she doesn't remember that he has kind of been there for as long as he has. And so that was very deliberate, trying to make sure that it was the counterbalance to the really quite depressing and almost overbearing kind of nature of his life, because it would be, because you know that from early on that this is going to happen kind of every year. And to me, if you were setting out to read that and you're like, oh God, this feels like it's going to be a really depressing Groundhog Day kind of scenario, but by introducing those characters who are the really kind of kind ones and the ones who make sure that he does have that love and support, to try and kind of offset that a little bit, was all
Yeah,
kind of
I think
part
he
of the
did that.
plan.
I think he did that really well, and it's really sweet how consistently wonderful Miss Michelle is. You know, she almost doesn't feel like she has an off day. Like
Oh yeah.
she's so nice, and loving towards these kids, which is so nice. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a relief, man. It was a relief to read a book that was just like it felt like a hug in a lot of different ways, and
Excellent.
it didn't feel like too an unearned Hallmark movie kind of everything's fine hug. It felt like there was some real grit to it, but the hug was earned. And so I just really commend you on that.
Thank
Um,
you. Oh,
I want to
that
ask, we'll ask now about the finish. And there's, sorry, just really quickly, lots of people saying they love the audiobook, Fiona and Mandy, which is awesome. And then I wanted to. Miss Michelle was lovely. A lot of people, a lot of love for Miss Michelle. That's really nice too. Um, so we'll talk about the ending quickly because a few people have mentioned it. Lynn specifically, I feel like you might have even asked this twice, so you're very interested in this um, answer, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of people are saying they feel like with the ending that it's sort of like there's so much character and so much left to explore. I think they're wanting a sequel. I will put my foot in my mouth a little bit. I actually feel like it's fairly complete, but I can see if you I could see there'd be more story too. But I did feel like very complete by the end. But where's your mind, Michael? Is there a sequel in the works?
there is not a sequel in the works.
Oh, okay.
I have
Sorry,
written.
Lynn.
I sorry, I'm not saying that there wouldn't be, but there
Okay.
isn't one right now. I've just written a second book, but it is not a sequel. It is a standalone kind of book, and it's but yeah, I kind of feel like it did wrap up. And but there are other things to explore.
Yes.
There's so much that you can do with this mechanic of the reset, and I think that
Yes.
there would be other things to do, and whether that would actually involve Tommy or not, or kind of another generation, or even this idea that perhaps maybe there are other people out there that have the same thing,
Mm.
which was something that I did kind of toy with briefly.
But I feel like I mean, the book is called How to Be Remembered, and then he is remembered
Yeah,
by a special group of people who are his most treasured. And, you know, I felt a bit like, oh, I wish Josh could keep on remembering him too. But again, you've got that little hint of, oh, it's still like a realistic. I mean, it's still an earned ending. It's not just a neat and a bow and everything's fine.
yeah.
Um, Cheryl said it ended a bit quickly. I think she wanted a few more things like a maybe not a Lord of the Rings style ending of the trilogy there, but you know, to spend some more time with Tommy and the crew, right, Cheryl? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think, yeah, it did kind of feel like it. And I know what kind of Cheryl means, that it did kind of wrap up quite quickly,
yeah.
but it was kind of necessarily so, in that those last kind of few chapters build and build and build to that to the finale, and I didn't want it to be something that then kind of peters out too much. The
Mm,
epilogue I thought was important to try and kind of give that hope, and to give that kind of hopefully answer a few questions. Um, but I thought that any more than that, I think you're right, actually, Ben. I think that it answered the question kind of
yeah,
that was asked on the cover,
yeah.
um, and any more would potentially just kind of run the risk of dragging it out. And
Well,
also,
I like too. Like I can fill in the blanks a little bit. Like I feel like
yeah,
I know the crew. I know Tommy. And so I can sort of fill in a few little blanks here and there with my own ideas about where he'd get up to. So I feel optimistic about his situation going forward. Yeah, a few people have actually mentioned that when the dad comes back, they were sort of really hoping that there'd be this very big cathartic kind of dad would sort of sense, and he sort of does. But like again, I feel like you're going for like a type of not authentic. It felt real. It didn't feel neat, and it felt a
Mm.
bit messy. And it was that something specific, or did you ever toy with having dad sort of re-enter and suddenly go, "Oh, I remember a little bit." No, okay, yeah,
No,
explain.
no, no, no. I wanted that to be quite complete. That it
Yeah,
was
right.
that to me, I thought otherwise it almost I was worried it would lose credibility. And I was actually
Mm.
quite upfront
Yes, that's the word. Credibility. That's the thing
yeah.
I've been looking for. Yes, it does feel credible.
And because you have this narrator, this kind of omniscient narrator telling the story, essentially, it's not Tommy's perspective. It's nope, the lights have gone again. Let me just nope, just sit in the dark for a while. There we go. Have you ever had anyone have to do this during their during the chat?
No, we've had a few different things happen, but you're the
Yep.
first to do like the
Just
wacky inflatable arm flailing tube
yes,
and
yeah, get
wave.
full into
Yeah.
it. And uh no, the dad. I wanted to I was actually yeah, that's right, the narrator. To me, that was kind of important because it kind of gave an insight into what other characters were thinking as you were going. It wasn't just from Tommy's perspective. And I thought that look, I quite like to read almost that style as well, where you are finding out what other people are thinking as you go, and it's not for everyone. It can take a little bit of getting used to when
Yeah.
you read it,
Yeah.
but it also meant then that I could kind of say up front at one point in there, I think the line was something like there was not going to be one of those Hollywood moments when the memories come flooding back. And I can't be any more direct than that and kind of say, hey, this is not going to end like that. And so
Yeah.
I think that hopefully it was kind of people would be kind of fairly well forewarned that it
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily end in
Yeah. And I can
hugely
see that where
satisfactory way,
I can
but
see where
enough.
like if dad did suddenly come back and like, "Oh, I just want to have a new relationship with this stranger that walked into my
Yeah,
home," it would strain the credibility of it. It would feel a little bit more, like I mentioned earlier, it would feel a little bit more Hallmark movie, perhaps, and
yeah,
less
yeah.
earned, maybe.
Yeah, and
Um,
that scene with his dad is probably my favorite in the
yeah, it's pretty moving. And May's just said, um, in seeing his father, it was sad because it showed him what he missed out on this relationship. I agree, May, and Nick is saying too, it made the whole story feel more poignant. Yeah, that's sort of what you're going for, right? Like it's quite a
yeah,
moving moment, even though it's one half of the equation doesn't understand that it is moving,
yeah,
which
yeah.
even makes it even worse and more heartbreaking.
Yeah, and just that kind of idea that he when Tommy left his house that he'd had this feeling that he just met someone special, which isn't kind of him knowing that he's forgotten him, but just knowing that Tommy is a pretty special kind of person.
Yeah,
That special person just happens to be his son, but he's kind of never going to never going to know that. And so yeah, I just that
I feel bad all over again now.
yeah, me too. Me too. And again, I shouldn't smile when I say that because that makes people get the wrong impression about me. That
No, it's look where this is just how we're dealing with our feelings is with humor.
yep, yep, yep. We can
We need
smile
to
through
sometimes.
pain. That's a good thing, right?
I think,
I
yep.
love your certainty.
We're actually nearly out of time, everybody. I'm really sorry about this. We actually only have an hour, and we're about 10 minutes away from the hour. Uh, May has said sorry for making us sad. May,
That's
it's
right.
life, and that's why we read, right? It's beautiful when we can feel things on behalf of characters. Like it's such a beautiful, empathetic thing to be, sweet and sympathetic towards people. It's nice. So don't feel sorry. It's totally good that we're feeling sad. Um, I love this question. Adrian had this question. I've never seen this question. I've never thought to ask it. I should ask this question more often. So Adrian has asked, what is a quality that you can identify in your wife that has actually aided you in your writing process? That's a really sweet question, Adrian. So Yeah, Michael, what is it about your wife that particularly, she helps you with your creativity?
And now, first of all, I'm going to assume that that is in fact Adrian and not Sean using an alias, going, "Hey, say some nice things about me." No, look, she is the most supportive person in the world. It's as simple as that. I mean, we've got two young kids, and and Sean was just so supportive of this whole thing. From the moment I said, "Look, I think I want to have a go at this," and there is there are no guarantees. It is as far from a guarantee as you can possibly get. And she's like, "Yep, I think you should have a crack." And just kind of making that time and giving me that kind of space and kind of just taking on so much with the kids and with just kind of general life. And she's also, this is probably less kind of heartfelt, but dialogue. If I can picture words coming out of kind of Sean's mouth, oh, the lights have gone again. What's going on here? If I can picture the words coming out of her mouth, then I can picture it kind of coming out of kind of Sean's mouth, the character in there that's kind of the more uncouth, kind of more the she's kind of a good sense check for dialogue,
That's
and
great.
is just yeah, I think overall there's like the very practical kind of side, and then also just the and when I was going through the editing process, I kind of, because she had read the book, and I spoke to her about it and said, "I need to make some changes. What do you think about this?" And kind of, and her, because she read it with such emotion the first time, I knew that kind of I was getting quite a genuine response from her whenever I asked her a question about it. So
Yeah, she
yes,
wouldn't lie to you to make you feel better about it. She would
no,
be honest.
absolutely
Like,
not.
so that's lovely. That's really cool. I love that question. So
That's a
thank you for
great
that one.
question. Oh,
Yeah,
that made me think. That was a great one.
put you on the on the opposite on the back foot, I guess. There's a lot of Oh, geez, we're still going, guys. We're gonna have to finish up soon. I'm sorry. Let's go through some really quick, some stuff here. All right. So Mandy has asked, how many drafts did you do?
Um, two before I kind of started, before anyone else read it, and then a third before I went out looking for an agent, and then probably and some more revisions after, on the advice of kind of Catherine, my agent, who is
Mhm.
incredible, and then probably another kind of couple of rounds of revisions and drafts, kind of working with Alan and Unwin here and source books in the US.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. And Pratiti has said, was a great book. I didn't lose interest at all, which doesn't happen often. That's awesome to hear.
That's fantastic.
It captured people. And then Robin has said, I was blown away, Michael, when I heard that it was your first book, as before that. And I'd given it 4.5 stars out of 5, which is really high up. Someone was saying, was it you, Fiona? Yeah, Fiona says, thanks, Michael. It's a wonderful book, and I've already given away 5 copies
Oh,
to family and friends. Is it because, do you feel like
Fiona,
me when I said it was like a hug, Fiona? It's like you're
it's a
hugging your family with it. That's what
hug
I feel.
away. I mean, just hug everyone you can find with this book. Just peg hugs at people. It's a
I
great
agree.
idea.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's earned hope, right? And this is what we were talking about. It's like, it's not sentimental saccharine, sort of like, it's not cloying. It's not sickly sweet hope. It's realistic hope, it feels like, even though it's this story, which is fantastical. It's really awesome, man. It's such a good book.
Thank you.
Um, I was,
Thank you. I think there was one question there that um,
yeah.
someone asked, that I was just so excited about this. The fact that someone asked about whether it'd been optioned for film, and yes, it has, which is very exciting.
That's extremely exciting.
Which actually happened kind of last year, before well before it was published.
Wow. That's big.
It was, yeah, it was when it was when the deal was actually announced, the book deal was announced in the US, that all of a sudden there was this kind of flurry of film interest. And so there I was, kind of sitting in my home office, which sounds pretty fancy. It was in the granny flat, actually, and having kind of Zoom calls with film producers of movies that I have watched and loved for years from Hollywood. And in the end, kind of we kind of went with one, and it's really kind of exciting. And look, I know that there's such a long kind of way to go, and lots of books get optioned for film, and they never end up on the big screen. But it's just such a
Yeah.
it was just such a thrill to see that someone else kind of read this and go, I reckon this could kind of translate onto the big screen. I'm like,
A lot of people are saying congrats. It would make an awesome. You can really see it. Hey, you can really see the film out of it, and you can see a lot of yeah. It would be a really beautiful film to watch. So that's exciting, man. I'm really excited for you. It's
thank you.
so great on your first one that it's just done so well. Um, Now a couple of people have yeah. Look at it. You guys are so nice.
Yeah.
We've got the best book
Oh,
club here. Thank you everybody for being so kind. And yeah, it's been such a good chat with you, Michael. I would like to end on, and a few people have asked this about, can we know any details about the next book? I mean, you've just said you've just finished it, so can we hear anything, or is it still hush hush?
it is still fairly hush hush. It is still kind of speculative fiction, because I've discovered that this is the kind of genre that I love to write. It's what I love to read, as well, but it's what I just love to write, because it's such kind of fertile ground in terms of, as long as you can make it kind of realistic and give it credibility, that it's
Yeah,
kind of almost unlimited. I've got no idea how people write kind of crime fiction or anything, because I couldn't think of anything that would be original. Kind of, it feels like every motive has already been kind of canvassed and every suspect has already been arrested. And
yes,
I'm
it
like,
can feel like that
I
for sure.
I don't know, kind of, yet still every year there are brilliant original kind of crime fiction novels coming out. So for me, it's speculative fiction, and it is this idea of kind of something extraordinary happening to a fairly ordinary person. And so
Mm,
that's kind of what I'm doing again, in this second book. Very kind of different though, in terms of what is happening and who it is and where it is and all of this. But but I've discovered that that's what I really love to write. And then I've got another idea I want to do after that, and then one more
perfect.
then, and just kind of, I could happily just keep writing this forever.
You're on a roll, and I guess that's Fiona giving out 5 copies that she's bought for people. That'll keep you writing creatively so that we can all be happy.
Oh yes, please.
Thank you, Michael, so much for being part of Ben's book club. Just a
Thank
couple of
you.
quick things to wrap up. Thank you, first of all, to the wonderful attendees. You guys have been so awesome, and it's so cool that we're such a special group of people, and I'm just really proud to be part of this book club. I'm just going to. Oh, awesome, mate. That's great to hear. I'm just going to put now in the chat. There's a little link there to the Ben's Book Club Facebook page, which is where I post about, books that are upcoming, and we have a bit of a chat about what we're reading and things like that. So if you want the Facebook groups, free to join, and it's just there for people if you're interested in becoming a part of Ben's Book Club every month. I'll send out reminders and things like that. And next month, I do have the book already, which is really great. We are going to be reading this book, which, yes, there's a lot of people talking about this one and just how gripping it is. So I'm pretty excited. And this is Michael. This is a crime like you were talking about. Um,
So
yeah,
another one of those ones that I'm completely in awe of.
yeah, me too, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's a killer at large, there's a detective, it's crime fiction, but real excited to talk to Joan about this one. And this is what we're doing next month, but I'll post reminders and stuff in the Facebook group. But other than that, oh, awesome, Ian. I'm glad, yeah, because it can take a bit to get to Ian sometimes over in the UK. Um, and Peter said this, Michael's authenticity is what makes his book so successful. Yeah, I agree, man. I agree.
Thank you.
Takes a good book, but it also takes a special kind of author to have that mindset, I think, too. But yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody else, and
Thank you so much.
pleasure. And thank you for
Really
the book.
enjoyed
I'm
it.
looking forward to your next one, man. Hopefully, we can do this again when the new one comes out.
Please, I'd love that.
That's awesome. All right, well, take care of yourself, and thank you, everybody, for being a part of Ben's Book Club. And we'll see you guys next month.
Thank you.
Bye.